This episode is actually the first in a series of branded residence webinars, and you will hear about more episodes later on today. But for now, we are here to talk about the role of mixed use in branded residence economics. And my name is Eloise Hanson. I'm the editor of Boutique Hotel News. We're an online trade publication covering the global boutique, lifestyle, luxury hotel, and branded residence markets. And I'm also the host of the Global Branded Residence Awards, of which you have just seen a short teaser video. We believe that this sector is in need of a worldwide recognition platform, a way that we can benchmark success and excellence. We're really excited to be launching this initiative, and more details about those awards have been popped into the chat. So we're going to spend around 45 minutes chatting with our experts today, followed by some time at the end to take any questions from the audience. So please do get your questions in early should you wish to catch our speakers. This webinar is being recorded live, so every registrant will receive a copy of that recording along with a written summary of the key takeaways within 48 hours. And when you leave this webinar, a short survey will pop up on your screen. Any feedback, any ways that we can improve what we do here, would really value your input there. So would appreciate any responses to that survey. So a short snapshot of some context stories. And here are two stories that we run recently on Boutique Hotel News. And these are two projects which provide a useful case study as to where the mixed-use branded residence market is heading. I mean, it highlights how brands are expanding into new markets and broadening the amenity mix. So in Egypt, Nobu has partnered with developer Sodic to roll out an integrated pipeline of hotels, residences, and restaurants across 3 projects. So demonstrating how branded residences are supporting multi-site expansion strategies. And meanwhile, in Austin, U Music's first hotel and residence project highlights how non-traditional hospitality brands are entering the sector. For context, U Music is the hotel arm of Universal. So at this project, alongside 600 branded residences, the development will feature an open-air amphitheatre, recording studios, a nightclub, wellness facilities, and more. So it illustrates how experience-led amenities are being used to differentiate mixed-use schemes. So let's meet our speakers. I'm going to ask each to introduce themselves from left to right as per the PowerPoint slide. So David, let's kick off with yourself and welcome.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm David Yanks, the Chief Development Officer for Rockwell Group. We're a 350-person global architecture and design firm, mostly focused on hospitality, but work across lots of different sectors, including entertainment, education, residential. And we have offices in the United States and Europe, and that's how we cover the globe.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. Diane, over to you. Welcome.
Thank you, Eloise. Thanks for having me. So I'm Diane Daudin Clavaud. Beside other roles today, I will speak on behalf of Rhodium. I just joined as a Chief Development Strategy Officer at Rhodium. We advise developer, investor, and brands on branded residences opportunities globally. So we work with established brands, emerging luxury brands. So we have few in the pipeline that we already partner with, like Bugatti, Lalique, and other brands that we will be announcing. And my background is in international hospitality development. I'm known to lead since 15 years development of Nobu, and I'm also involved as a chief business officer in Dani Garcia.
Thank you, Diane. And Bill, over to you. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Bill Barnett. I'm the managing director of C9 Hotelworks. We're an development advisory, market feasibility group who work out of Asia. I'm based in Thailand. We work over the entire region. Asia right now is a $60 billion market. It's a huge branded residences market, and we cover a lot of ground in this. We've done over 100 branded residences projects, so it's an important part of our practice.
I think I've seen recently that Vietnam is I think one of the top performers.
Vietnam's now number 1. Vietnam's fast growing. Vietnam is the China story from the late 90s, early 2000s, that kind of trajectory. Yeah, it's that kind of economy driving the marketplace.
One to watch. Well, all the LinkedIn profiles of our speakers have been popped into the chat for you all to connect. I'm flagging early that Diane is only with us for a short time today until 2:30. So if you do have any questions, please get these in early. Let's squeeze her for all she's worth whilst we've got her. Right, let's kick off. The role of mixed use in branded residence economics. David, you work a lot with developers. So when an owner brings you a site, how do you model what is physically and feasibly possible when you are looking at the hotel, the residences, and all the amenities that can be included?
Well, we try to go down the priority list of our development clients and say, do you have a business plan yet? Do you have a pro forma? Are you working with somebody like Bill yet? What are your thoughts around what you want inside the project? We then start to look at all the zoning, code, anything permit related in the market that the project is in, and then start with very, very basic programming and massing if it's a new ground up building or if it's an existing structure, looking at those plans and trying to figure out what's feasible without really thinking about return on investment, but just starting to think about what is actually possible to fit into the project. And then as it goes deeper into the development cycle, realizing with other experts kind of what things will cost, what can stay in the project, and what might need to go.
Mm. Have you ever found that removing an idea, and that could be an amenity, maybe reducing the residences, has that ever led to an uptick in the ROI?
The amenities are typically the piece of the program that gets squeezed the most
Mm.
because the return is either, it depends on how long the client wants to hold the real estate for. If it's a long-term hold, then highly amenitized projects are more prominent. Whereas if it's going to be something that's a flip, they want the sales of the units and they want hotel room rates to go up dramatically quickly and then get rid of the property. So it really depends on what their priorities are, but it's usually the amenities that do get squeezed.
Mm-hmm. And Diane, from a I suppose financial investment perspective here, when you're underwriting a mixed use project, a branded resi project, I should say, what component typically receives the most scrutiny from investors?
Um, I think the investors don't underwrite only returns, but they underwrite risks. So they need to look not only at the projection, because everyone can build a financial model, but they need to test whether the assumptions are realistic. And that I think is through the brand premium. Does the brand that I'm choosing justifies a higher sales price and will give me a stronger demand? Does the market is fit for residences? Can I actually sell at those price in that market? The cost of construction, because every country also has its own legislation, is on a different tax system on residences, and also the cost, the construction, the financial, and the operating cost. And also to look at the exit strategy. I think is very important to know if the project will still perform if the market conditions change. So I think that's what the investor I'm talking to are likely to scrutinize the most.
Hmm. Thanks, Diane. And coming over to the demand side for a moment here, Bill. I know David mentioned earlier that it's the amenities that typically get squeezed the most. So how do you know whether a mixed use branded residence concept will actually resonate with the end user, with the buyers? How do you test that?
There's a lot of, this is a fragmented marketplace. We always say they have to find equilibrium. When you talk mixed use, you may have a co-located hotel and branded residences. You might have a standalone branded residences. There's a lot of different rules and different brands and different buyers. So I think you have to look at each individual project uniquely and look what's going to be the value add. Certainly when you're looking at saying what's going to drive value, with a buyer, there's a much difference between an urban buyer and a resort buyer. Urban buyers are quite logical. They look at yield, they can look at per square meter price and everything else. When you get to resort markets, people lose their mind. They're emotive buyers as well. So you have different rules. It's a very, very interesting space because not one case model actually applies to everything as well. And I said the main thing is when you involve hospitality and hotel brands or alternative brands, equilibrium is the case because you're balancing between two type of brands.
Mm. Is there, my next question is around what is it that truly creates the demand versus just adding features? And I know Diane just mentioned that the real test, the true test here is what's delivered through the brand premium. So how do you how do you understand what is going to truly create that demand? Or perhaps maybe this is in the projects that you've overseen, Bill. What is it that the buyers are typically, is it an amenity? Is it the yield, as you
I,
mentioned on the
I think
resident?
each individual case, we worked on a project which was an ETRO project, which ETRO came in and said
Yeah.
part of a larger mixed use, and they introduced eight penthouses and large apartments. So it's a limited. It's interesting sometimes with the non-traditional brands because these brands understand how to have collector's items. They understand how to push pricing. Generally, you always say the pricing premium. But once you get into the top level of ultra luxury or even the non-traditional brands, they're able to have that collector mentality. Too often you're thinking about product instead of thinking of the people buying and thinking who the customers are. So much of that demand is from a certain customer and finding what is palatable to them. They're not comparing prices or comparables in a single city. They're comparing prices against a broader global experience. So it's a fast moving space.
Mm. I uh, uh, an idea that I actually got wrong was that buyers of non-hotel branded residences, particularly when it comes to cars, say Aston Martin, Bugatti, Ferrari, that these are already car owners and they are buying into the brand and the legacy and they want to be part of that universe. But for some car brands, they're actually non-car owners when they buy the real estate, but ended up loving the real estate so much that they go on then to buy the car. So you're looking at a much larger ecosystem. It's not just mixed use in terms of bricks and mortar. You are actually buying into a full lifestyle. So something that I thought I would add there because it's buyer motivations are certainly very different. David, you highlighted earlier that you will start to look at zoning and planning restraints quite early on once an idea has been pitched. So, how do these planning constraints and zoning rules influence the economics of that final mix between a hotel resi and amenities?
Well, heavily, and we're actually very much a narrative based design firm. So what we want to do is tell a story about the project, no matter what's the components that make it up. So you have to align what the dreams are of both the developer and the buyer side, but also what's feasible. Like in New York City, zoning is heavily rigid. So I always say we have some of the worst architecture in this city from some of the best architects in the world, and that's nobody's fault except the zoning is so hard to manage. So I think some of the frosting on the cake of some of the amenities and some of the other things besides the base sales proposition sometimes has to go away when there is not enough FAR or you're overbuilt or there's a certain requirement for mechanical that, any given project, 70% of your budget goes to things that the guest will never see or the tenant will never see, and the 30% goes towards that narrative. So it's hard to manage both, but zoning certainly helps dictate that from the beginning.
Hmm. Is there a particular market or region that is very tricky that you would like to work within? I want to hear some personal experiences of what you've, the challenges and the opportunities of what's crossed your desk.
Yeah, I mean, right now, South Florida is a huge market
Yeah.
for really anybody. And that's on the ownership side, on the brand side, on the design and construction side, where it's becoming so busy and everyone's buying up so much real estate that permitting is taking very long. So if an owner or developer has forecast a certain amount of time or in schedule, it could be twice that amount of time without knowing why, because they've got to go through the city. it's become really much of an arms race in terms of branded residential, and specifically Miami, where every brand is putting their name onto a building. And you brought up like the automotive companies, and I think part of that really is they're building their lifestyle brands out: Ferrari, Bugatti, Aston Martin. But when it comes to the actual selling of the real estate, and we're in some of these projects now, what is that proposition when you say this is an X car company branded residential? Are they servicing the units? They're a car company. What are they actually servicing? Is it just, like Bill said, a collector's thing? What does that mean versus a hotel brand who can really come through and do food and beverage and service and housekeeping and management and all of that? So it's an interesting time right now, specifically in Miami, to see what the buyers will actually get in the end after going through one of these branded marketing projects.
Hmm. Thanks, David. And Diane, from your point of view, do you have a sweet spot between the ratio of hotel keys, residence amenities, or is this truly local market dependent?
Yeah, I think there is no universal formula. Every market is different. So it really depends on the location, on the land value as well, the demand that you will be able to initiate in that market, the brand positioning. Not every brand fits in a particular market. It's not because you have a luxury brand that it's going to work. So you actually have to select your brand quite with quite a lot of interest, and be sure that you were mentioning a car brand. You need to be sure that it is great for a car brand. Otherwise, maybe if you are in an area where the food and beverage is mostly needed, maybe you're going to go to another brand. So you also have planning constraints. Um, Usual the rule of thumbs is that like my colleague said, resort are usual more residences drive value because obviously resort are especially when you're talking about places like Middle East or Asia, your residences usually drive the value, but in the cities we have a lot of projects which are combined with hotel because they play a big role. And the idea is to create an ecosystem where the hotel serves the residents and the amenities and also the restaurant. So it's basically all connected. So I think the objective isn't really the balance, but it's about creating value. And I would say that the hotel can create the activity and build the brand. The residents usually generate the upfront capital and benefit from the hotel service because they know also the quality of the brand. And on the amenities, being a restaurant focused brand or wellness focused brand, that also adds a huge plus. So it really depends of the brand. You were also mentioning car brand. I just wanted to bounce on what you were saying. You don't actually. Most of our buyer in Bugatti do not own a car. Like you actually they actually like the design of Bugatti. They know that they will be able to enter certain activities and certain clubs of Bugatti or certain parties or events for car owners. And but they don't officially own a Bugatti. And Bugatti is also, for example, a big line of Casa and furniture line, like Fendi has Fendi Casa, which is less known for most of the public. So our owners also really look for that type of furnitures and the Bugatti lines, the Bugatti Casa retail brands as well inside the branded resi. So it's really it really depends.
I feel that the branded resis are quite complex projects anyway. And I feel that the phrase "build it and they will come" just does not hold true in this type of conversation. And Diane, whilst I've got you, and it builds on your answer just there, a question from the audience. For a brand like Lalique, for instance, what are the first things that you would think about to introduce such a high-end connoisseur brand in an international market that might not be so familiar with the brand? And that's whether you are positioning the brand for the developers or the guests coming from all over the world. How would you assess
Uh,
that brand and position it?
Yeah, actually, the positioning of Lalique is quite interesting because it's really about craftsmanship. And if you look at it, Baccarat did turn a very good turn at one point. They took the wave and they actually went to branded resi. Lalique took more time now to do it, but you actually look at it, Lalique is way older than Baccarat, and their customers are really all over the world. And what the public doesn't know is that actually Lalique own a lot of hotels and fine dining restaurants in mainly in Europe, but also in different parts of the world. In the countryside, for example, in Wales or in France. And that's not really famous about Lalique. Everyone knows mostly about the crystal and the chandelier, but you actually do have an expertise in hotels, an expertise in uh, stays in the long stays in hotels and fine dining restaurants, which we are really interested to push all over the world. It is a very interesting brand when also you look at all this like uh, um, history in the craftsmanship and the way it has developed all over the world. There is a really big family history also behind. So it's really charged in history.
I
Mm.
think something Diane said is really interesting because the genius of the fashion groups is they know how to pre-sell, they know how to have limited editions, and going back to what David has said, there's a narrative, and that narrative is so important. Looking at marketing before sales, that's really the industry's unresolved question: is how do you market this thing? And at the end of the day, these are groups which know how to market in advance. They do it much better than hotel groups, quite honestly. At the end of the day, selling limited editions, having customers who are looking for their products already and having a story, and that already weaves a premium pricing in, and that's unique, and that's something which the hotel groups will have to learn to do to also be equally competitive with those groups at the ultra luxury level.
Mm.
I think they're doing so with their yachts. If you think about the
Yeah,
the limited, not cruise ship,
sure.
big boat yachts, it's incredibly limited, it's incredibly exclusive, and they're launching more per brand, whereas the residential's a little more democratized.
Sure.
Mhm. Bill, you just touched on the sales and marketing, and just so that I can weave in a question from the audience, would you recommend using a master broker even though they will promote multiple other options to the developers? Or would you recommend that the developer use their own internal sales team?
Traditionally, what we've seen is we've seen in many projects, especially at the very top end of the market, that there'll be a developer-led team. And at the end of the day, there's not a single market. Most often, you're going to have fragmented marketplaces, fragmented segments, within that market. And there's not one answer really for across the board typically. So if you're selling something, say, in Thailand and you're selling to the Eastern European market, you're selling to a UK market, you're selling to a Thai market as well, you're going to be looking for three different solutions. But I think the key is that usually we see developer-led teams at the very high level because again, you want to deliver your messaging, you have that team on board, and that's usually the best practice that we see, the highest and best practice that we see is there's a but rarely, but we've also seen it, in certain countries when you're selling to a broad domestic market. We had a standard project here in Thailand as well, where standard sold through a large international brokerage, which was very intensive here, and they were able to successfully sell the project because they knew who their market was. So if you do know who your market is, work to those segments. But otherwise, you've got to, cover a lot of ground internationally. It's very difficult to do.
Hmm. Bill, staying with you for a moment here, seeing as we're on sort of sales and potential resales, particularly at the end of the project. How much does that wider mixed-use ecosystem contribute to that long-term value and the resale performance?
It can often vary. Again, urban resorts, whatever, urban and resort properties are very different. With resort properties, often say alpine real estate, you go to Japan, you go to other markets like Niseko, you've got a lifespan where somebody buys early on for their family to enjoy this asset over a number of years, and they're going to probably sell once their kids grow up and they become empty nesters. There's a value to that resort property. In an urban situation as well, it really depends on location, location, location. What are the key demand generators of that area as well, and with the resale. And I guess another key is early buyers typically, and like most real estate projects, early buyers are getting better returns. But typically, the money's to be made on the real estate at the end of the day on a resale. It's not yields, it's not anything else. As long as you can cover your costs, it's in the resale. So what are those dynamics towards a resale working in the marketplace? That's what's driving your appreciation.
A great question from the audience that I think all of you might be able to chime in on this. Around branded residences typically sitting in the luxury segment, or are we seeing instances of mid-scale or upscale? And therefore, how do the economics and considerations differ when you are moving up and down the chain scale of hotels and resi? Diana, I know we've got 2 minutes of your time, so I'm going to kick off with you, and then we can hand over to the gentleman.
So the question is, if you do have an hotel or not.
So
Sorry, I
if
didn't.
if so branded residences we're typically seeing in the luxury segment, but I think we're starting to see instances of mid-scale or upscale branded resi. So how would the economics and considerations, for instance, about the ratio split or the type of amenities included, differ in the mid-scale and upscale versus luxury?
So I only do luxury. So with no Bugatti, Lalique, or the brand, it's so we are really focused on luxury. So some are more like retail oriented, some are more art de la table oriented, some are more like food and beverage oriented, or car oriented. So the amenities will really follow this. But and also sometimes like at the beginning, our brand with Rhodium, we thought we're only going to do branded resi without the hotel, and we actually discovered that some of our projects have maybe more than 150 units without a hotel, and some are more than 150 units with a hotel, and some are more like 40 units with the hotel. So the combination is really depending on the project itself, the investor, so the developer we are tying up with, and the market, because at the end of the day, for us, the amenities needs to follow the brand and needs to follow what can be possible on that market. So probably I would not push a restaurant in a Bugatti scheme, because Bugatti doesn't do a restaurant. And I would be more careful when it's Bugatti or Lalique. That's why we are partner with Rhodium, that the operator is really integrated from the beginning, when it comes to follow the technicality of the project, or when it comes to the design, or when it comes to every factor from the beginning. When it's more hotel chain project, obviously the hotel will be mostly the operators, at least for the brand that I know. So it really depends, but I'm more specialized on luxury. We don't really do mid scale in the brand that I have.
Hmm.
I think, Eloise, to go back to your question is, when we see a drift down from luxury into upscale and to mid-scale, you're seeing a different kind of buyer. Oftentimes, that kind of buyer is going to be more oriented towards a hospitality operation. They're going to like the usage. They're going to like, perhaps they're looking for an investment return versus other things. It's a lower pricing point. So it's a different kind of customer. And I think that's always, I guess the question always is it going to be, are you able to sustain that product through the market cycle as well? We do see groups, saying we'll go into upscale, we even have groups like Hotel 101, which is going, they're selling in Barcelona, they're selling in Los Angeles, they're selling in Japan, they're selling 23 square meter rooms, they're selling at a lower pricing point. It's a NASDAQ listed company, and they are selling that same proposition. But generally, when you commoditize and things and move it lower the chain scale, it becomes a much different element where you're not just having buyers look at capital appreciation, but they're yield oriented. So there's a lot more pressure on the hospitality operation.
Mm. Thanks, Diane, and thanks, Bill. David, I will come to you next, and feel free if you want to chime in on the flow between sort of mid-scale, upscale, and luxury, by all means. But moving on to look at the shared spaces and amenities, how should developers think about those types of spaces in a mixed-use project? How do you balance exclusivity with inclusivity? Is there a split between what is included versus what can be revenue generating? I mean, what's your take on this?
It really depends on where the project falls in that level of luxury, because it starts to ask the question, how much of the building do you want to be used for public and how much is private? And once you start to think about that, you start thinking about spas and membership clubs and things that are either solely for the tenants and the buyers in the building, or if you open it up to the outside, you might need a bigger, kind of more robust business. So I was just in Japan last week, and 2 hours in a meeting talking about taking one more guest room out of the hotel to put it to the spa because the spa was too tight. And the reality was they just said, we can't do it. We're not going to be making the money on the spa because it's a private spa, but we will on the hotel guest room. So there's a residential component to it also. But really, down to every square meter, square foot, it really depends on what the return on investment to build that out actually is. And while it is nice to have amenity in the building, it might not be absolutely necessary, and it kind of goes away towards the sales. And then back to the luxury and kind of going down that ladder a little bit, luxury clearly led the way in terms of branded residential, but we're working with a lot of really exciting brands that are just under that luxury level and don't want to be luxury because they have a whole portfolio of food and beverage brands and lifestyle brands and clothing things all under their umbrella that they're offering as part of their sales, which is super exciting. Bringing Asian brands to the US, bringing US brands to the Middle East. It's all a mix now, and while luxury might be aspirational, there's a huge population of people that are very happy to buy into that narrative of, if I buy in this building, there's all this other stuff going on, and maybe I'm single, or maybe I'm looking to meet somebody, or anything like that. I might be able to do that in this building. Whereas if you just buy into a super high-end luxury branded residential, you might not have that. You might not have that lifestyle inside that brand. So I think it's becoming more of a mix in a positive way.
Thanks, David. Quick note to our audience members here. All the LinkedIn profiles of our speakers are in the chat. I know Diane does need to jump off now.
Sorry.
So
Yeah, I
thank you.
apologize, but I have to take
No,
off. Thank you, guys.
thank you, Diane. So yeah, LinkedIn profiles are there. Please connect. We've got lots to get through still. And audience members, if you do have any questions for our panel, please keep them rolling in. I do have my eyes on that Q&A box. David, staying with you for a moment here around what truly creates a premium in mixed use branded resi, or when does it just become an expensive burden? Let's take wellness, which seems to be the major theme of the industry this year. To simply say we're going to add wellness facilities may not quite cut the mustard. So how do you assess what's truly going to drive that premium?
I think it's working with the developer and understanding their desire, as well as the sales and marketing team, to see where they want to place the project. We're doing a lot more work in wellness outside of spa, but more med spa and longevity and internal health and all of that as an amenity. So if you start to look at, you have a certain number of square meters or feet for that wellness space, and spas don't necessarily drive that bottom line so much in every market, what else could you offer that will be used? So it's all about use to me, and we try to work with our developer clients on that. Is putting something on a plan is great, but what is actually going to get used? And that trickles down to every kind of amenity. But in terms of wellness, it goes back to staffing, and it goes back to all these other costs for the project that they may or may not see a return on, but they do want to follow the trend. So it's hard and it's challenging, but I think understanding the local market really helps.
Mm-hmm.
I think jumping on what David said, I mean, wellness, I don't think the industry has any idea what a wellness residence is at this point. It's
Not
something which
yet.
is, what's a boutique hotel? You've got, 500 room boutique hotels. You have 100 boutique hotels. You have, you no longer have wellness. Now you've got longevity. You've got other things as well. It's a space very much which is defining itself. And I think something David also said earlier, it's interesting if you go to Japan and we're seeing, in some of the residential projects, we're seeing where there's a greater the value system changes with buyers, and buyers in certain markets, they want more, they want active fitness. They want these kind of facilities. They value that as well. They want the private clubs again. So that's very much, what we'd be designing 10 years ago and say, let's shrink it down is changing again. People want the exclusive environment to have meetings now because they're working from home. So they want meeting rooms. They want other spaces. So you really have to look at what the trends are of the moment as well and what's capturing, what the perception of luxury is, because luxury is moving. It's a younger demographic. It's a working demographic. It's a different value system. And I think that's driving the area programs as well. And the hotel groups also. The hotel groups also come back and say, if we have a co-located hotel together with the branded residence, we want to duplicate facilities. So it goes to a developer whose antithesis says, why can't we have the same swimming pool? Why can't we have one gym and everything else? But yet from a hotel perspective, the hotel operator perspective, they have to, that this is a brand standard. So there's a lot of movement in the space as well, in terms of designing spaces between what hotel groups want and what perhaps the developer wants with saleable GFA as well, and trying to find what the customer is going to value.
It's a really good point. We just did a project up in Boston. It's the first Raffles hotel in North America, and it's a new tower. And Boston doesn't get a lot of new towers, and it's stacked residential and branded residential and hotel, but one shared amenity floor. And theoretically, it should have been split, and the hotel guests should have their own thing, and then the residents have their own thing. But economics, said otherwise and said it's got to be shared. It's working really well. But it then goes back to staffing and costs and how are you running those actual spaces in a way that the tenants are happy and the hotel guests have a seamless experience.
I think that's interesting, just to jump on that really quick, because at the end of the day, some of these projects, when the more amenities you have, the higher maintenance costs you have, and sometimes that's an issue. Even with the highest luxury buyers in the world, at the end of the day, they don't like dipping in their pockets to pay maintenance fees, and they compare other real estate they have, and they compare costs and everything else. So that service element and the add-on, the programming does incur a lot of extra cost, and you really have to make sure you have alignment with your buyers, that expectation. Otherwise, you all of a sudden have your buyers splinter, and it becomes an issue with HOAs and everything else. So that's something you also have to consider.
We've got so many questions coming in from the audience. I am trying so hard to keep up to speed, but one has come in around the mix of amenities here, which I think is what we're talking about. How do you feel about using a mix of brands, each in their own specific domain? So, for instance, one for F&B, one for the spa, one for the gym, rather than it all packaged under, say, a hotel brand. Do we have legs here? Are we seeing real mixed use come to the fore?
We're starting to see some of that, and it goes back to the public-private question. Are you trying to keep those amenities private to the tenants and the owners, or are you opening up the doors? And what we're seeing is, the more public spaces, it's about capturing people's time. It's about selling coffee and pastries in the morning, into lunch, into cocktails, into dinner, if it's a public space in one of these types of buildings. So that kind of brand partner should be an expert at doing that. They might not be doing wellness so well, and they're not there yet, but bringing on multiple partners, I think, is a model that can work if costs work for the owner. If you look at a place in New York like Kith Ivy, there's various brands inside that one small size project, but it creates extraordinary excitement. It drives up membership rates, it drives up membership in total, and it becomes just a really interesting place to go. Erewhon is in there. I mean, there's just different things happening that if you had one brand that says they're great at everything, you might not have the best experience.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think curating those spaces with brands which are appropriate, as long as there's economics at the end of the day.
Yeah.
In terms of retailing, even at the highest level of luxury, you're seeing where you have different brands coexisting on the floor back of a theme or something else. So it's a good way to go. But again, it has to be making money for everybody. And at the end of the day, you want best in class. So were you able to combine three or four best in class? We have seen designer spas, designer wellness centers go into mixed use projects, and they haven't performed necessarily as well. I think that's really an empty space right now in terms of immersive wellness versus just wellness, which you want to check in for a day and do something else, and then maybe perhaps go to the Nobu restaurant the next night or something else. Is that what you're going to be looking for with the whole product? So there has to be that narrative back of the entire project to mix brands. I think that's really important.
And just another note on the wellness thing. There are more trends happening in wellness, just different services that everybody wants in that box that says wellness on your floor plan, cold plunge, hot plunge, like all these different treatments that are happening, which just adds a lot more cost to the actual build out of the project. Is there the return on those different services? That's the question, and that becomes really challenging.
Mm. I know the topic today is mixed use, but a question from the audience now is all about standalone residence projects, and I think it's a very good question. Hospitality hotel brands have historically been accepted as branded residence leaders, which is logical with co-located sites. Do you think there should be more scrutiny in the value slash expertise slash experience they can bring to standalone residence projects? Bill, your thoughts?
I mean, if you look at a company like Marriott, if you look at Bonvoy, Bonvoy has become not about hotels only. Bonvoy is being about as many products as you can sell. Hotel companies, as they penetrate a market, they have nowhere but to have more hotels at the end of the day, and they need brand penetration. I mean, on paper, if they're in a city and they have one hotel already, they have a service base, they have a base of business already there. But to spread out branded residences in that same city and start doing that as well makes total sense. And the more you can have the brand immersion as everything else. I guess the issue is, you're not really cannibalizing because you're not selling transient rooms, but by having that brand present in two or three locations, this is the way of the world. This will go bigger and bigger, because at the end of the day, the world's not that big for these hotel brands. They have to grow in a city where they have critical mass. So we're seeing probably the biggest growth in standalone residences right now across all the groups saying, as long as there's a hotel there, we'll enter it with other branded residences because these are these are listed companies who have to grow revenue, and the revenue is not just hotel revenue, it's growing their licensing.
Mm.
And I always think about the experience of the tenant or the guest. And to me, we're doing a St. Regis branded residential project in Miami. There's no hotel. And if I'm an owner developer, I would have a lot more comfort, I think, in a hospitality, a hotel brand, running the services for a branded residential tower. Whereas, not to hit on the cars again, but on a car brand, it might be wonderful. They've got lifestyle lines of clothing and artifacts and things. But if you're buying into that experience, what are they actually doing in terms of service? So to me, it's all about service when you're buying a residence, whether it's a permanent residence or you might be there a few times a year. You want it serviced by people who service other guests all the time. That's my opinion. So scrutiny, absolutely. But determining the brand and what your aspirations are in terms of price point is also incredibly important.
Mm. Thanks, David. I'd like to come back to Bill here around the buyer yield expectations, around how developers should consider those forecasts and perhaps where that gap currently sits between what is projected versus what is actually achieved.
I mean, there's always, at the end of the day, you're going to look at a project and look at the premium. And, a developer is doing a project because they want a premium. It's not easy. There's two things that move. How much does it cost to build? How much can you sell it at? It's a very simple business at the end of the day. But what a buyer wants often has different motivations. And again, you've got yield buyers, you've got end users, you've got other reasons why people buy these properties for property appreciation. Once you're going to yield, there's not many short-term yield buyers out there right now. Because in many jurisdictions, the hotel groups will be only renting long term. There's been a lot of litigation in the branded residences space about selling securities. So nobody's doing mandatory rental pools anymore. Nobody's doing this kind of pooling as well. So the hotel groups are taking a very cautious base towards having rental, short-term transient rental type branded residences. So this space is changing as well. So I guess in terms of yields, if you're renting a property on on a month-by-month let or annual rentals as well, it has to make sense for you if you're financing. But in many parts of the world, you have cash buyers as well. You go to Dubai, you go to many parts of Asia, you have cash buyers buying these. So at the end of the day, they're buying capital appreciation, they're buying prestige, they're buying something else. So the rental yields per se, the further you go down the food chain, if you're going to yield-based people as well, it's a different kind of buyer, it's a different marketplace.
Mm. Uh, uh, I'm not sure how you would measure this, but it's a valid question from the audience again. We often measure ADR, occupancy, and RevPAR. Are developers beginning to measure emotional engagement, sense of belonging, or guest well-being as indicators of long-term asset performance? How you quantify that, I'm not entirely too sure, but is this something that, Bill, perhaps you might be seeing? David, I'm not sure if you have any insight into this.
I guess the best place for that is you go through the Singapore Changi Airport. You've got an LED screen. You've got five little faces. You've got a happy face. You've got a sad face. You have something else. That's a pretty effective way of doing it in the base model. But that's really difficult to go back in those spaces. At the end of the day, there's one degree of separation often in these luxury projects about buyers, and people buy word of mouth. They buy for certain things. If you have one happy customer, it's creating that well-being for another customer, and your project's going to be having that kind of clientele base. And I think that's the best way to gauge it. But certainly, as I said, well-being and everything else is becoming more and more ingrained in people's minds. So I think it's an interesting space there's some measurements in branded residences. There's not. You can't do it. STR doesn't track branded residences. There's not the metrics, hot stats. You're not going to get the metrics. That's a space whereby how do you gauge success? At the end of the day, for branded residents, this is something which we'll see this evolve, but it's still at a very immature stage towards measurements of anything.
Mm. This is a big case here of self-promotion, but one way you can measure success is to enter the Global Branded Residence Awards. And if you win, that is a great indicator as to how your project stakeholders are performing. Um, Simply had to be done. Right, David, coming back to design for a moment here before we turn to look at how markets are performing, or I suppose different rules are affected by different markets. But David, what design decisions can be made, say, early on in that design process that can help to maximize value while avoiding any costly changes later on in the project? I think there's an ongoing conversation. The ongoing rhetoric is, my goodness, we need to start engaging all stakeholders so much earlier on in that design and planning phase, because by the point that designers or architects are engaged in a project, the math isn't mathing. So, David.
Yeah, I mean, we're very proactive. It's a very boring subject, but we're very proactive in terms of cost estimation from the day one of the project that we get engaged on. Typically, a project gets designed, you then do a big round of value engineering, you take a lot of cost, and nobody's happy. If you do it along the way at every single design phase, and you understand unit pricing of every finish that we're putting in, all the construction costs, you can then start to make decisions, bigger decisions, around what's actually in the project versus waiting to the end and getting an overall budget. But then I go back to 30% of that budget is actually experienced by the person in the space, and 70% is mechanical systems and things behind the walls. So you've got to spend every currency very, very smartly, which means you need to program the spaces really intelligently. And you've got to really scrutinize what's going into those amenities. And we try to do that with our developer clients, but also sales and marketing teams in each market, and look at all the comp sets to say, well, maybe an industrial kitchen in the amenities is a much better use because you could use it for private dinners, chefs can come in, bachelorette parties, whatever the use is, versus, let's say, a screening room where it's a dark room, it's used maybe once a year for whatever the big sports event is in that country, and nobody else uses it again. There's no, films aren't being run, so it's a waste of the budget putting that space into the amenities. So it's creating a great program. It's kind of driving down cost on the design along the way, and then creating just smart amenities that will be used all the time, hopefully.
Mm.
Maybe just to jump on that, because interesting what David was says. I mean, at the end of the day, we always tell our clients, developers should be developers. They're going to create a great project at the end of the day, together with architects, of course, as well. Hotel companies struggle with brand standards for branded residences. Tech service fees are moving. Hotel companies are saying we're going to have brand standards as well. So we're seeing greater involvement by the hotel groups in terms of brand standards. But you also have real estate. When you're looking at many projects, when you've got penthouses as well, these are being sold as cold shell or warm shell to give clients flexibility. Often in resort properties, we see where there's a amount of customization wanted as well, because when you have somebody's perhaps a husband and wife, the wife would like a certain kitchen, other things. So there's always a degree of what you're selling and some flexibility. And if you're able to work for flexible space or have a certain amount of customization, this is important, certainly at luxury as well.
Mm. And Bill, to come to you next around controlling owners' costs, particularly when you are trying to scale. Why is scale so important in that equation of trying to control owners' costs while maintaining that value?
I mean, there's always the interesting case of Amman Resorts, which, Amman Resorts, Adrian Zeka founded, iconic Amman Junkies, iconic name in the world as well. And for years, they floundered financially. They went through different owners as well. And when you see Amman today, Amman has branded residences in Tokyo. They have branded residences in other parts of the world because they have urban branded residences. They have scale. The problem is when you have too few units in a project and you're not able to have a great service. You're not able to have that hospitality backbone as well because you simply don't have a larger hotel to rely on. So you can't provide, as we've been talking, this entire thing is luxury services as well. So scale doesn't matter.
Mm.
Again, you don't want something overly large, but you do have to have a base scale, and the model has to work. Sure.
Mm. I wanted to talk around getting the economics right across borders. And I know we touched early on in the conversation around which markets are notoriously quite difficult or which markets are actually seeing quite a lot of activity right now. So, a question to both of you here. When it comes to getting those economics right, in where different markets have very different rules, what challenges or opportunities does this present? David, I'll come to you first and then we'll bounce over to Bill.
Well, with everything in the political world going crazy these days, I guess you could leverage currency exchanges and you could actually add more into your projects depending on where it's located. I mean, I've been talking about Canada-US relations for a couple of years now because it's been up and down. And there are projects that are happening because in a certain market because they can get aggressive on currency and sometimes they stop because geopolitically it doesn't work. So I feel like understanding the market in terms of what's affordable to build and then understanding what's kind of trending in terms of amenities and then seeing what's actually successful in terms of comp sets through data and research, putting that all into the blender, mixing it up, and then coming out with a fantastic project is challenging. But the ones that do it best, it kind of goes back to the question of are brands or owners tracking kind of emotional and wellness response to these projects? I think people are probably most interested now in quality of delivery of construction of the actual product they're buying and services. To me, those two things and how they're actually serviced and how they're taken care of in these places make the most sense and are most important.
Mm. And Bill, what do you think around getting economics right cross borders?
I
What?
mean, first thing, economics, getting it right is, 60% of Four Seasons global pipeline has mixed use projects. You have to underwrite costs. David was just in Japan. In Japan, if you build a new hotel, you're getting a 2 to 3% yield. You have cheap money, but you've got to do residential. Some of these markets, you've got rising land costs, rising development costs at hyperinflation. So mixed use is important to balance and get projects built. So I think that's really key. And certainly when you go from country to country, as the rules change, you see that benchmarking move. But also, it also creates some opportunities. But again, it goes towards your sellable areas and what how you can do that. It's not always there's a lot of gray areas within building entitlements and everything else, no matter where you are, and trying to get the most real estate out there and the saleable areas in a tasteful way and using the jurisdiction to your favor versus that. That's why using great experts who understand local planning is, this is a real estate business. It's not the hotel business at the end of the day, and that's really critical to managing that cost element.
Mm. And final question to you both. Where do you typically see developers go wrong when it comes to the economics of mixed use branded residences? Where is that opportunity that can be improved? Bill, and then I'll move to David.
I think finding a designer who understands the narrative was, I think we talked with David, understanding a narrative, understand these ideas. What are the big punch points? If you come away, what are those key unique selling points? What's going to make you feel passionate? What's that hero photo? What is going to make you passionate about that project to get a buyer to say, I want to buy this real estate and come to that element? I think that's certainly one of the biggest challenges. Where do they go wrong? Too often they listen to a hotel operator. They'll listen to just have a standardized operation. They don't have the big idea. At the end of the day, these projects, when you want to outsell the market and sell at a higher premium, you still need that creative edge. You need something which is going to, the light bulb's got to go on, and that's between usually the designer, and it's between the developer thinking of great ideas. Yeah.
And moving to the creative and the creative mind. David, what are your thoughts?
I would say delivering on that promise, whatever that promise is, whether it's, these amazing amenities, you got to deliver those amenities. They've got to be amazing. They've got to be totally seamless in terms of how they're used. Or we have this brand that's completely inherent to what you're buying into. It really has to be. It can't just be a name on a building because you're paying a premium for something that you might get nothing in return as a buyer. So I think it's really delivering something that's extraordinary, obviously quality-wise, something that differentiates that project and the rest of the kind of crowded field that's out there, and then service. Just being able to, whatever it is that you're selling and offering, you've got to kind of deliver on that. Otherwise, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, it just fades away.
Mm-hmm. David, Bill, thank you so much for carrying the show, the latter half of this conversation. Just to also flag to our audience members once again, all LinkedIn profiles of our speakers have been included in the chat. We are going to leave this webinar open for a few extra minutes at the end, just to allow our audience members time to follow up on anything that we've popped into the chat today. Also very aware we've had many questions that we haven't quite had time to get round to, so this is your opportunity to ask those questions directly with our experts. I've just got some closing slides that I would like to run through before I say a final goodbye. I mentioned this is the first webinar that we're hosting in a small mini series around branded residences. Our next webinar is all around the global trends in branded residence demand and buyer behaviour. That's taking place on the 21st of September. And then we are looking at the operator effect on branded residence success. That is taking place on the 2nd of November. The links to register for both of those webinars have been popped into the chat. We would absolutely love to see you there. And here is some more details about the Global Branded Residence Awards. I believe this is the first dedicated award scheme to the branded residence sector globally that's powered by a leading trade publication. We have 18 award categories. They are no cost to enter, and categories span the full life cycle of projects. So from design to architecture through to technology, your brokers, your strategic partners. Please do take a look at what we've got on offer. The deadline for entering is very soon. It's the 31st of July, so there's only a few weeks left. The entry process is super simple. All you need to do is visit our dedicated awards platform, create a profile, and once you have created that profile, you can start, save, and edit your entries all the way up until the deadline date. You've got to be in it to win it, is all I'm going to say. So we'd love to see those entries come rolling in. And if you're interested in working with us, do get in touch with my colleague Katie. Her details are up on your screen. They've also been popped into the chat. And a final big thank you from me to both Bill, David, and Diane for their time today. Thank you all so much. I look forward to seeing you all again soon in September for the next webinar in this series. And I look forward to staying in touch in the meantime. So thanks all and see you soon. Bye now.
Yeah.